Hello, my name is Oshenbarefield, and this is my Defending Religious Freedom project, my final project. I chose Rastafarian Hair Politics. This is Africana Religious Studies 225. Now, first off, a little bit about the Rastafarians. The Rastafarians are a Bible-based belief group. They believe that the Ethiopians are the true Jews, the true Hebrews, and are the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. They hold a biblically clean diet that doesn't include pork, but most of them are vegetarians or something close to a vegetarian. Actually, the first diet that God gave out in the Bible didn't even include meat. It was fruits, nuts, seeds, and grains. So the first diet that God gave out in the Bible was vegan and or vegetarian. Also, the Rastafarians believe in a certain treatment of hair where you're allowed to trim your hair, which you're really not allowed to shave your head. But of course, if you choose to do so, you choose to do so. But keeping your hair and keeping your hair in the form of natural black hair as like an afro or dreadlocks or twists, sometimes some braids, but usually some natural form of natural black hair, right? And they keep dreadlocks as a representation of their religion and also an opposition of the standard white European hair that's straight. Another thing about the Rastafarians is that they smoke weed, they smoke the ganja. Yeah. But it goes all the way back to ancient times where people would take some sort of drugs or some sort of chemical to either initiate or enhance religious or spiritual experiences. So Rastafarians, they use weed, they use the ganja. They use it in what they call reasoning sessions. So I imagine in these reasoning sessions, they'll smoke, get a little high, and either start talking about God or start talking about real life. So basically, picture blunts in philosophy. All right. So what is Africana Religious Studies? Africana Religious Studies is the study of religions that originated in Africa, or the study of native Africans who study certain religions, or the descendants of native Africans. All right. Academically, there's a man named Fraser. He was one of the pioneers for African religions to be considered a course or considered a program to be studied at universities or colleges. What he did was he went to parts of Africa, went to Brazil, and other places that had native Africans or descendants of native Africans. And what he did was he watched and observed the rites, the rituals, the deities, yeah, parts of the text that they would read, and also he would observe their lifestyle, what kind of life they led. And I imagine that he went and chose people who were more religious than the next person. So why is it important? Africana religious studies are important because Africa is supposed to be the oldest continent, the biggest continent, and it's supposed to be where human species first developed from. And the more important religions, the more important spiritual practices, what folk tales, lores, legends, and all of that stuff. The more popular stuff in the world when it comes to religion and spirituality, it comes from the European part of the world or the Middle Eastern part of the world, which is one of the more ancient parts of the world, which is also Asia. So, with Africa being as old as it is, with Africa being as old as it is, and Africa still being a host to the most black folks, it's interesting to see what kind of religions that they actually take seriously, which ones are more popular. We know Islam is very, very popular in Africa, and so is Christianity. Yep. And then all around the world, there are black people who believe in their roots from Africa, and it will help them to give them a sense of identity because religion itself is tribal. Religion comes from lands, it comes from certain areas, certain continents, certain countries, certain places. And then a lot of people practice religions based off of the people who share their skin color and what they practice. Religion is old as a mug. It's old. All right. The impact of religious racism. Educational opportunities. Yeah, so this is where we come back to the Rastafarians. So what happened with the Rastafarians, this was in Africa, I forgot. I looked over this stuff. By the way, most of the stuff is in Module 3. Yeah, so they had an issue. The Rastafarians had an issue where they were trying to study at a certain school. It's a very good school, top school in the area. They wouldn't spend their time trying to get into a school that was average or below average. The school was a bump. So what happened was is that the school had told them like, look, if you want to study at our school, you're gonna have to cut your dreads. You have to get rid of the dreadlocks. And they say, you know what? I wanna, I wanna, I wanna practice my religion, keep my dreads, which is a part of my religion, and I wanna get a good education. Now, in situations like this, when you have something of high value and there's always people lined up behind you to step into the spot that you're at, it kind of forces people to make a decision. A lot of people either just leave or they just cut their dreads, whether they're Rastafarian or not, they cut their dreads off. But this particular group of Rastafarians, they just wasn't having it. So they're saying, look, I still want to go to the school. The school was saying you can't come to the school. And they say, you know what? You are discriminating against me based on my religion. My hair is a part of my religion. School basically like we don't care. You don't have to come to the school and go to a different one. So what happened was is that they took him to court. And I was watching the interview too. And it was an older dude. He was sitting on the porch. And he was like, "Yup, we take him to court. I want a class action lawsuit." I started rolling. He wasn't playing. He knew exactly what he wanted. He said a class action, not just an individual, a class action. So they had took the school to court. And I forgot how long it took. I forgot how many proceedings there were. But the Rastafarians won. They were allowed to keep their hair and to get the good education. In my opinion, it should have never been taken to court. That's ridiculous. I don't even see why. I don't see why the school had such a strong. I don't see why the school had such a strong stance on the dreads. Now, other parts of our reading from Module 3, it talked about how dreads could be associated with more violent or more criminal like people. That's understandable, right? But I don't remember within the case study that being the case, okay? Now, another thing is if the dreads wasn't hindering other students from learning or making it more difficult for them to learn, then there was no reason for it too. And then another reason, unless the dreads are stinking, because some people hair be stinking. We all been to school, y'all. You know, sometimes, especially middle school and high school, you go to school, it be funky people sometimes. So if the dreads wasn't stopping other students from learning, and if the dreads wasn't stinking up the place, I don't see why the school was really saying that that was so important for people not to have dreads. Now standing up. So the Rastafarians, they stood up for their race. They stood up for their religion, right? And they made a stand for their religion, and they set an example and a representation. And plus, they also were serious about going to a good school and getting educational opportunities. Another side note, scares me. The despite the accents in the African videos, those African people, those black folks in Africa that we saw in those videos, I know we only just saw a few people, but they just generally sounded more educated and more smart than us black folks in America. I just want to put that out there. Next slide. So the importance of religious freedom. Humanity is a religious species. Out of all the billions and trillions and gazillions and fulfillions or whatever comes after that, out of all the souls, out of all the people who exist on earth, most people believe in something more than man and molecules. Most people believe in the spiritual, or they believe in the metaphysical, or they believe in religion. And then they believe in none of that. The next thing was philosophy. Most people believed in this other way of thinking besides just science or just focusing on just people, right? So with that being said, it's been a minority of people throughout history. It's actually abnormal. It's irregular not to be religious, not to be spiritual, not to believe in something more. And then there's certain practices, shamanism, witchcraft, and other stuff like that. They believe that fruits, vegetables, herbs, rocks, stones, metals, they have spiritual and metaphysical properties. That's where spells and all that other stuff comes from, right? And then less conflict. Because us as humans, this is sociology and this is psychology. Us as humans, we usually don't have a problem with nothing unless we are morally upset. Like if something doesn't really stick us in a moral way that we find uncomfortable, a lot of us we let a lot of issues go, you know, unless you just a hot head or your ego is out of control, which is what we got going on, especially in America. We got more narcissists than ever. But anywho, that's besides the point. So when it comes to something like religion, when people feel like they're being discriminated against, or they feel like they're being forced to do something they don't want to do, like another religion trying to force people to become converts, then it'll be less conflict because when you try to force somebody or when you discriminate against somebody based on religion, that's one of those things that people feel morally disrupted, so they're more likely to stand up for that. And we're not talking about bully situations where one group is just beating up on another group or just way stronger, way smarter. We're talking about two opposing forces. We're talking about a back and forth here. Yep. And then some people who are semi-religious or some people who are not religious and took a few, what's it called, took a few college courses off of religion. They learned about the Christian Crusades, and they'll say that's the reason why religion is a problem because there be too many wars and too much fighting. And then you have situations like ISIS. You remember, like 10 years ago, they had ISIS, that radical extremist terrorist Islam group. That's what they called them. That was going around causing issues based off of their religious beliefs. But generally, as humans, as long as you ain't doing something that's disrupting others, that's violent, that's highly immoral, you mind your business. You really get to do whatever you want as a person. Yeah. So when people are confronted about their freedoms, conflict is not far behind. Next slide. Yeah. Oh yeah. One thing I did leave out. I was surprised to see the discrimination because the situation with the Rastafarians, this all happened in an African country, in an African city, African neighborhood. The other stuff that we studied throughout the class, right? It usually included one race discriminating against another race based off of religion. But this time we had Africans and Africans. You know what I'm saying? Same people, different skin tones, some darker, some lighter, some, yeah. But it was definitely discrimination going on. Yep. And I think it was good that they took him to court and stood up for that. Yeah, not like how serious that they took their education. But I was surprised to see any discrimination in Africa like that. Because, like I said earlier in this little PowerPoint presentation, is that there's more African people, there's more black folks in Africa than anywhere else in the world. So you're gonna have more black hair. There's no more black hair anywhere else in the world besides in Africa. So to see them discriminate about hair, I was surprised to see that. But honestly don't know much, and that shows how much I know about Africa and how and their religions and their education system. Well, I think that's all there is. So that's a wrap.